turning life's wake-up calls into positive change. Join the Bucketlist Accountant himself, David Patterson, as we explore how life's challenging moments can become catalysts for meaningful transformation. Learn how to convert wake-up calls into lasting positive changes rather than temporary reactions, and discover why connecting these moments to your bucket list goals creates sustainable motivation for both business and personal growth. This episode provides practical insights into making permanent positive changes when life gives you a reason to reassess your priorities. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl. Let's get into making your bucket list happen. David, I wanted to delve into a conversation that we had in a previous podcast a little bit further about the whole idea of sometimes we get hit by some negatives in our things that happen in our life. They give us a bit of a hit, wake-up call, probably the best way of describing it. And it's how we respond and whether we respond in a way that has a longer-term implication or whether it's just a short-term hit and then we go back to where we've always been, and how you make those changes. And then just, maybe you just want to recap for people who picking up on this episode, a personal story from your point of view in recent times that has given you a little bit of that wake-up call.
Yeah, I think what I might do, I might go back even further, if that's okay, because it's then around my mother. So my mother passed away when she was 53, and I'm 53 now. So it's coming up 20 years since she passed away. So I was in my early 30s when it happened. And I've thought about this, and I've sort of struggled, I guess, with this for a long period of time. But some positives were coming out of it. So when Mum passed away, it was kind of like, oh my God, I'm 33, don't have my mother. It kind of gives you an element of how short life is and how you really need to take the bull by the horns and make the most of everything that you do. And to a small degree back then, I did that. Not long after Mum passed away, I was working as an employee for a local accounting firm. I went in and handed him a letter of resignation at the time and said, Mum's passed away. I realised life's too short. I've wanted to have a crack at running my own accounting business. I'm going to do it. So I had that short-term impact, at least in that part. I actually made a decision and I changed what I was doing. But I do know that once I started running my own accounting business, I didn't give it my all and I didn't push as hard as I could with that concept of life being short, because there became a gap between when Mum passed away and when I started to, I started getting back into a routine, the routine that I was comfortable with and safe with, and I didn't keep pushing myself at that point in time. And the thing that I find really interesting, hopefully I'm not going too deep into an area I don't know a lot about, but I find it fascinating how, like, some people can grab an opportunity and grab a moment and just run with it, just go held for leather. And I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this have been through that period where either someone's passed away or something negative has happened to them. And they go through this little period of, I've got to make changes, I've got to do things, I've got to make the most out of this. And we've all had this period where you understand that life is finite and then we only get one crack at it. Regardless of what happens afterwards, this bit we only get one crack at. But I find it, look, I take my example as the prime example. Why did I not continue pushing, knowing that I've only got the one crack at it? It's an interesting, I wish I knew the answer because it would help a huge number of people, but just a fascinating area of humans that we have this little hit where we kind of go, oh my God, I've got to do something. And then we just collapse down into normality again not long afterwards.
Yeah, it is human nature to kind of do that. And I think the challenge is, how do you actually capitalize on it when you have been hit with something? And no matter how small or extreme it might be, someone passing away is obviously an extreme at one end. Other times it might be that you lose a client. and it's because you did something wrong. And do you actually take that on board and implement and make a change, or do you find yourself 6 months down the track going, no, they told me that I should have been doing this, and then I never did it?
Yeah.
It's a really difficult thing to be taking into consideration, but it is so important to have that.
Oh, look, it's massively important. And I think it's a topic that I don't, like I said, I've probably been toying with this for 20 years, trying to work out the triggers and how to keep going with what you're doing. And I think it also hits on another thing that we've spoken about in the past, and that is breaking out from your normal and putting yourself out there and really having a go at it, regardless of what that is. It's really, the interesting thing for me is what creates one person to do it and one person not to do it. And the psychology, like you said, behind that. Because, most of us, I would suggest, and you can correct me here, but most of us, I think, fall back into what we were doing anyway.
It is a difficult thing to get out of. And I think part of it is something that you talk about all the time, which is the bucket list. And it's revising things in the bucket list, but tying it to a more personal one. So if it's in the business sense, if it might well be, the example of, well, if I improve this with the client, if it doesn't have an implication in your bucket list on a personal level, then it probably doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go, well, if I improve this and I didn't lose this client, and I know that I gained one more client, therefore I can, if one wasn't countering the other, but I kept two, now I can have the holiday that I wanted to have and take the kids to Disneyland.
Yep.
There's much more incentive to do that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think that's where that bucket list becomes vitally important, in that there's a purpose that's sitting there. And I think if you have that bucket list and something happens, it probably makes you reassess the things that are on there and potentially even bring some of them forward to make sure that they actually happen so that you don't miss out on those. It's a very good point, and one that probably answers the question that I just had, in that having that purpose there is the thing that'll drive you through and keep you motivated for longer, because of that very fact that there are the things that you want to do. Whereas if you haven't got that clear definition of what you want to do, that's when you're probably going to fall back into the normal.
This podcast is brought to you by bucketlistaccounting.com.au. Speak to David Patterson and his team if you want to take better control of your life and business, helping small business owners like you be successful designing the life of your dreams. Go to bucketlistaccounting.com.au or check out the show notes for more information. Now back to the program. I think one of the lessons out of this as well is to learn, and we've talked quite a bit in the podcast episodes that we've had together about how you're quite proactive in the way that you operate with clients and encouraging them and sitting down with them regularly. But I think the flip side of that is that business owners, families need to be proactive themselves, because here's the thing, that if you don't communicate that something has happened that has given you a wake-up call, whether that is the loss of a client, whether it's something as you've experienced, the loss of a relative, it could be any number of other different things. It's having that regular openness to be able to communicate that, so that you can come back and say, should we think about the bucket list again? Should we have a conversation about what that's actually mean to you? Because dealing with your own mortality is a huge thing for people, and understanding, might make you, rethink a whole bunch of things, whether it's insurance or whether it's going on the holiday, or what level of what things are important at what point, or going and saying, what, I actually haven't spent time on going, on a gym membership because I didn't think that was all that important, but now I'm dealing a bit with the mortality thing. I actually think that we need to prioritize that and do those things, and recognize that maybe that means that I'm take an hour out every, 3 times a week out of the business in order to be able to do that as well. So all of those things factor into the equation, but the communication process needs to be two-way to make that happen. Otherwise, the likelihood is you do fall back into that whatever you were doing before.
Yeah, that's right. It's the understanding of why something is important to you. That's right. And even between my wife and I, for example, her interests are different to my interests, but we've spoken about it, and I understand why some of her interests are important to her. And so when she wants to do them now, or when she's planning to do them or take a trip somewhere on her own to pursue those interests, because I know it's important to her and why it's important to her, it I'm a lot more open and accepting that she's off doing those things because I know why. So you don't get to the same level of, I think there can be a bit of reluctance to allow people to do some of these things if you don't understand why. So you begrudgingly let them go off to do something, but inside you're going, oh God, they're off doing this again. I don't understand. I wanted to do this and they're off doing this. And so you're right. The communication on those areas becomes extremely important, and having that understanding of why those things are important to each of you. And even to your business partners in what they're trying to do, having a full understanding of why the things they want to do is important to them, I think adds that, as we've spoken about before, adds that extra element of emotion, which then creates a greater understanding.
Yeah, I think it all goes back down to why, the bucket list is so important and why thinking of it as a bucket list rather than just as a budget, because it gives it that purpose to it, and being aware that is going to change constantly almost
Yes.
because, we have a good day, we have a bad day. Sometimes those bad days have various things that go, "Oh, I'm such an idiot, I should be doing
Yep.
this." And unless you tie it back again and share it, that's part of the process. And I think that's the difference here as well, is recognizing that you can't be in business in complete isolation from those that are willing to support you, be it family, be it your accountant and other pieces in that puzzle.
Absolutely. I think having at both levels, the business level and the personal level, the more people around you that are with you in both of those environments, the more they understand those things that are important to you, the more they will then help you achieve those goals by helping you or allowing you to implement, from a business perspective, implement changes within the business, because they know that those changes hopefully will allow you and to achieve your outcomes, but equally, by you understanding, if you've got a business partner, understanding what's important to them, allows them to achieve the same thing. And I think that adds an extra element of enjoyment and excitement about achieving the goals from a business perspective, because not only do you know that you're getting your goals met, but you also know that you've helped your business partner get to where they want to get to as well. And I think that extra element, I think, is vitally important.
I think as well, part of it in that communication process is also reviewing things and seeing whether that negative that you had and you communicated, whether you've actually, whether it actually has the desired impact to make a change, and reviewing that process is important. And I imagine that, these sorts of things come into conversations I'm assuming you've had with various, couples and families and business owners over the years, and them feeling comfortable enough to tell you about some of those negative things and to have those conversations about the impact that it can make.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a conversation and elements that are built over time, and as trust builds up. But the sooner you can get to those areas, because people don't like talking about the negative outcomes, do they? We like talking about the positive stuff, but the negative outcomes can be just as important, to understand them and know them and to appreciate the impact that they're having. And when you have a greater understanding of the whole, you can certainly, it allows you to help people more by understanding the bigger picture when something negative happens.
I think, if I can say this, David, to wrap up this conversation, that the big thing here that I think is the differentiator between a lot of accountants and the way that you operate, particularly as, the Bucketlist Accountant is that it's a much more of a communicative process. And too often what happens is, and I don't want to be critical of all other accountants, but most other accountants are dealing with you, during BAS or tax time, and they may make some comment about, it's up, it's down, or whatever else, but it's not necessarily being proactive in the way changing it, the way things should be projecting into the future and what you should be allocating. I think it's important that people understand that relationship can be so completely different, and it's something that they need to think about when they're considering what they're doing with accounting, because it's not just about going, well, did I get, enough tax back this year, or which is what I think people tend to focus most on, how much did the accountant charge me and how much did I get back from the tax man?
Yep.
And right, that's good, because there should be more to it.
Oh, 100%. And, over the years, the number of conversations I've had is exactly the same, early days of how much tax am I paying? Do I, even to the point, do I need to buy this piece of equipment to save my tax? It's the question's not about, will this piece of equipment help me improve my business? It's more focused around the tax, and people need to change. I think people need to change how they think about these things to worry more about the improvement aspect of everything rather than any tax outcome. I think, to me, as an accountant, the tax almost should be a secondary outcome to business. Tax is a consequence of a good business. So if you're improving your business constantly, you should be paying more and more tax, and you should be, I'm not going to say the word happy, but that should be a mark of success in that you're paying more tax, because that means that your business is more successful. It doesn't mean you can't look at ways of minimizing it, definitely, but I think the primary focus needs to be around building and growing your business so that you can achieve goals that you want to achieve. Tax is a small outcome of that, and a small cost. Or maybe even you can look at it as an investment, because the more tax you're paying, the more money you're making, the more things you can do. So, I think when you can get people away from thinking about coming to the accountant and thinking just about tax alone, the quicker you can get to that process, the better.
Yeah, it fascinates me that so many accountants out there that promote first and foremost that they're tax accountants. And really, when it comes to the whole topic that we've been talking here about, in having real implications that are happening in your business, you want to be able to have that conversation and not just think purely about, well, okay, you've had a bit of a drop, or this has happened in your life, and therefore the consequences are just in tax terms, or in even just simply in, dollar value at the end, because it's more than just the numbers. And to make real change in your business, to, as we talked about in the previous episode, to get comfortable in the uncomfortable, all of those things, to take advantage of negative things that happen and turn them into positives, requires a different kind of relationship.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think that's the exciting part about it is, and it's two things. I think one is it helps them, the client, more when you get into that space, but also from a personal perspective, it's much more enjoyable helping people grow than what it is to save someone tax.
The Bucketlist Accountant podcast is brought to you by David Patterson and his team at Bucketlist Accountant. Go and visit their website for more information, details of course in the show notes. I'm Anthony Pearl, your host from Podcast Done For You. We look forward to having your company in the next episode.